The Israeli deep state is accelerating and escalating its all-hands-on-deck effort to oust Prime Minister Netanyahu from power ahead of January 20th. I'll have all the information and analysis of this incredibly dangerous situation coming up on In Focus. Okay, what am I talking about with this coup? Let me just start with the latest headlines, and I'm going to move backwards to the analysis so you know what's going on. The prime minister has been on trial for various corruption allegations, which I'll get to in a second. They've all fallen apart, but no big deal. The prosecution rested its case in shambles in August. And now on December 2nd, the prime minister's defense attorney is supposed to start with his case, providing his case. And the first witness that is supposed to be testifying on behalf of the prime minister is the prime minister himself. And in all the previous 4 years of this trial, each of the witnesses has been expected to testify 3 days a week. And in the case of the prime minister, it's supposed to last for anywhere between 3 and 6 weeks. Now, each witness who testifies in hearings that last about 7 hours. So we're talking about testimony from the prime minister of 21 hours a week, every week for the next 3 to 6 weeks in order to complete his testimony on behalf of himself in this trial. And it's essential, apparently, from the defense's perspective, that he be the first witness in the trial for himself. So now, under normal circumstances, if Israel wasn't in a state of war, it would probably be possible for the prime minister to figure out a way to get this done. But now we're in war. We're in a war for our national survival, right? We're being mauled by hundreds of missiles and drones and rockets every single day, not only from Lebanon, from Hezbollah, but also from Iran's terror proxies in Iraq and in Syria and in Yemen, the Houthis. So we're getting slammed from with missiles from 4 different fronts, mainly from Lebanon, but not only. And we're in a very precarious time diplomatically, where you have a hostile administration that is looking for a way to harm Israel as it walks out the door, and an incoming, very friendly administration that isn't in power. So these are dangerous shoals that have to be tread very carefully, and you have to and you have to do it while you have soldiers who are fighting in very, very difficult battles, both in Gaza and in Lebanon. Yesterday, we lost 6 more soldiers in a battle with Hezbollah forces in South Lebanon. Okay, so this is a very, very dangerous war. It's a war for Israel's national survival. We haven't finished. It's not over. We're still in the thick of things. And again, we're in a very precarious diplomatic environment with the outgoing Biden administration on the one hand and awaiting the very friendly Trump administration on the other hand. So obviously, the prime minister has to devote all of his time and efforts to leading Israel in this war. But no, the court expects him to begin testifying 21 hours a week for between 3 to 6 weeks on December 2nd. So Prime Minister Netanyahu's attorney, Amit Haddad, petitioned the district court in Jerusalem that's hearing the case and asked the 3-judge panel to allow them to delay the opening of the defense's case for 2 months. He said, we're not asking for postponement indefinitely. We're not asking for the trial to be frozen until the war is over. We're asking for another 2 months of delay. And the prosecution went nuts. You'd think that this was a normal request. In fact, it's very modest, because in normal operating democracies, if a prime minister is on trial, then either the entire proceeding against him is frozen for the entire period that he's serving as prime minister or president of the country, or the charges against him are dropped altogether, because you don't want the leader of your country, and this is whether in peace or at war, to be in any way distracted by the fact that he has to defend himself in criminal proceedings. So in a normal country, that would be the case. But in Israel, we're not a normal country. So in Israel, where we have a legal dictatorship of both judges and state prosecutors, all that the Prime Minister of Israel's defense attorney asked for was a 2-month postponement. And the prosecution said, absolutely not, under no circumstances. We don't want the trial to go on for too long, after they took 4 years making their case and then refused. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself, but they took actions in just recent months to prolong the trial much longer than it otherwise would have been necessary. So they're saying we need the trial to end as quickly as possible, and therefore it doesn't suffer a 2-month postponement. 2 months out of 4 years already that we've been through this, and another 4 years of hell with these investigations of the sitting prime minister, beginning at the end of 2015 and going forward until his trial began in 2020. So this is a crazy claim by the prosecution, but that's their claim. It makes no sense. We're in the middle of a war. He's the prime minister, and he's saying, no. He has to start his testimony now. And then the judges, you would have thought, well, they would definitely accept the prime minister's attorney's request because it's so obviously reasonable and modest. But no, they agreed with the prosecution, and they said, nope. The prime minister has to begin testifying. Nothing material has changed since we made that determination in the past, like that we're at war. No, nothing. He has to start, like it or not, on December 2nd, deal with it. So what's interesting about this is, why is all this happening? Any reasonable person would look at this situation and say, this is insane. How can you require the prime minister to be tied to the witness stand for 21 hours a week for 3 to 6 weeks? That makes absolutely no sense. In examination, cross-examination, why would you do that? Why would you do that to your country? Obviously, the public interest is harmed by your decision. And here's the rub. Well, there's the public and there's a legal fraternity, and the public be damned, because the legal fraternity has determined that the only important thing in the state of Israel is ousting Netanyahu from power, which is why they've been carrying out this prosecution all along. And so what are they actually trying to do here? When Netanyahu was elected in November 2022, one of the many in-house NGOs that work hand in glove with the Supreme Court to give the Supreme Court the ability to govern from the bench, they petitioned the Supreme Court and said that Netanyahu is unfit to govern and should be blocked from forming the next government because he's on trial. And Netanyahu's attorneys responded to the petition and said there's no reason why Netanyahu can't perform the duties of office while he's standing trial. And therefore, he's not unfit to serve because he can do both at the same time. Okay? And so the justices, instead of throwing this case out and not accepting it because it's insane that anybody thinks that they have the power to determine whether the man who was just elected prime minister in a democratic election in the country has that it's not theirs to decide. The public just decided that Netanyahu is going to be the next prime minister. Not only did the Likud get far more mandates in the Knesset than any other party, but it was clear that there were 4 parties, all of whose voters voted for those parties, understanding that they were going to be coalition members in a Netanyahu-led government. So you had over 2 million Israelis who voted for this government, and they got 64 seats out of 120 in the normally evenly split Knesset, and there's no question that he was going to be forming the next coalition government. So rather than saying, we don't have any standing here, we're not a side in this is a democratic determination by the voters in an election, they accepted adjudicating this insane petition, and they said, okay, we'll accept the prime minister's claim that he can do both. Okay, not that it was unjust to even think for a second that there was any question that that a prime minister could be ousted from power because he's standing trial, right? No, that wasn't what the court did. So now, what's going to happen? You're going to get a petition to the court. This is as clear as day from the same, in-house NGO that worked with the court. It's probably going to be the Association of Civil Rights in Israel, because that's what they do. They conduct lawfare against the right through the Supreme Court. And they're going to say, look, the prime minister's office just said that he can't be prime minister and give testimony at the same time, and therefore you have to declare that he's unfit and oust him from power. And we can expect the Supreme Court to do so that Israel is in the midst of a constitutional crisis, and the district court judges, the 3-judge panel that just ruled that Netanyahu has to testify, and the prosecutors who insisted that he testify, were teeing off this move. So the move is to oust Netanyahu from power because he can't be prime minister and give testimony for 21 hours at once. I mean, just think about it. Say that there's, something urgent that requires the prime minister's attention that he has to know about in real time. You're not allowed to interrupt the proceedings of the court in order to do it. There's another reason why this shouldn't be happening. The Netanyahu's private home was bombed by a drone just a few weeks ago. He's working only in safe rooms now because it's not safe for him to be in places that are known and that are vulnerable to missile or drone attack. It's particularly drone attack because Israel hasn't gotten the technology to bring down drones, even when they're within our airspace and they've been identified. We don't have a very good rate of bringing them down, okay? We don't have that surefire technology like we have with Iron Dome for the rockets and the mortars and the short range missiles. So we're in the situation where he was already attacked by a drone. His house, his private residence was hit by a drone. And if it's known, everybody knows the location of the district court in Jerusalem. All you have to do is locate it on Google Maps or Waze, right? So you have all the targeting information right there for Hezbollah sitting there, right? And so he can be shot. They know that between the hours of 8 and 3 or 8 and 4 every day, he's going to be sitting and giving testimony in a specific courtroom in the district court. And so it's just, so putting him there not only endangers the prime minister of Israel, it endangers everybody involved in his court case. And then there was a reporter from one of the channels yesterday, he went to look at the shelter to see whether it's possible to hold a trial in the bomb shelter in the district court. And lo and behold, the answer is absolutely not. There's no way to hold it there because it's not a real bomb shelter and it's certainly incapable of holding hearings. So there's no possibility of protecting the prime minister while he's giving testimony, and there's no way of protecting the other people in the courtroom while the prime minister is in the courtroom. Okay, so it's insane. It's insane on a national security level. It's insane on the personal safety of the prime minister, and it's just insane from a democratic perspective. They say that the public interest is harmed if he doesn't. No, the public interest is harmed if he does. Right. But that's not the point. The point is that the public be damned. These people want to oust the prime minister, and they see this as their golden opportunity to do so. Because if he can't give testimony and be prime minister at the same time, then he can't be prime minister. Because obviously the testimony is more important than his duties as prime minister, for which he was elected by we the people. But who the hell are you, the people? We, the justices of the Supreme Court, the judges of the district court in Jerusalem, and of course the state's prosecution and the media. And by the way, what's interesting about the media is that they've played a pivotal role here in intimidating the judges at the district court, because when it was clear that Netanyahu's attorney was going to make this request to the district court, you started getting all the court reporters doing these leery reports, threatening the judges in the district court with humiliation, with shame, with attacking them if they even think for a second that he deserves a postponement of his testimony, then they're going to go down in history. And this was in Channel 12, Guy Pelly, Channel 13, Aviad Glickman. All of these people who have been part of the Lawfare operation, pivotal, key characters in the cast of characters that has been carrying out this legal coup against the prime minister. So they've been doing that. And so they're setting it up right now. They're setting it up because he said, he can't be prime minister and give testimony at the same time. So now, just before I started recording this show, I saw the news brief that said that Netanyahu said, fine, I'm going to give my testimony on December 2nd, go to hell. But here's the problem, right? I don't want him to give testimony on December 2nd. I'm sure that he's going to just whack every single ball that they throw him out of the court, and they're going to look like idiots. There's no doubt in my mind that his testimony is going to clear him, and they're going to look terrible when he's done. But I don't care. That's not what I care about. What I care about is having a prime minister who's running the war. I don't want this trial right now. I want this trial to be postponed until the cows come home. As far as I'm concerned, it's not important. I voted for Netanyahu, knowing full well that he was holding trial, and I didn't care. And here I just want to go back for a second to talk about remember, like a little reminder of what this trial is about. So Netanyahu was indicted in 2019, just before the elections in April of 2019, in an open bid to make him lose, to foment his defeat in the election. And it was stunning. It was actually the Attorney General Avichai Mandelblit announced Netanyahu was that he was going to indict Netanyahu. Well, that was we remember he had 4 elections. So right before the second elections, he announced that he was going to indict him. But before the 19 elections, he announced that he was thinking about indicting him, which is like, who does that? But he did it in order to try to change the outcome of the elections. And then he indicted him before, I think, the third election. And before the second election, he said he gave a press conference while Netanyahu was at the White House with Trump, and they were unveiling the deal of the century for peace. And there was a split screen. There was Avichai Mandelblit on the right, Prime Minister Netanyahu and Donald Trump on the left in the White House. And they were announcing the peace plan, and he was announcing that he wanted to send Netanyahu to jail. Okay, so there are 3 charges that Netanyahu is accused of, is indicted for in 3 different filings. So they're all being tried, one after the other. So and they're named by numbers. So one is case 1,000, one is case 2,000, and one is case 4,000. He was supposed to be 3,000, but they had nothing to indict him on in that one, so they dropped it. So just case 1,000, 2,000, and 4,000. So case 1,000, I'm just going to do this very briefly. He was accused of getting, over a period of 5 years, around $250,000 worth of gifts from 2 friends. Okay, and then during the prosecution's case, all of that charge, and in exchange, he was supposed to have given favors to one of the people who gave him these presents, former Israeli security guy who's been a Hollywood producer for about 25 years named Arnon Milchan. Okay, so $250,000 in gifts over a 5-year period. And during examination, during the prosecution's case, what was discovered was actually he and his wife received about a tenth of that amount, so maybe around $25,000 in gifts over a period of 5 years. And at the same time, they were giving reciprocal gifts to their friends. So it's not illegal to get gifts from friends. The amount that they actually got, and this is just sort of the largest possible amount that they got, was worth a quarter of what they claimed. A tenth of what they claimed, and there was no breach of faith because A, they're allowed, B, there was nothing to it. They got champagne or cigars around the holidays, their birthdays, stuff like that. Nothing, no big deal. And they themselves were giving reciprocal gifts to their friends. And it worked out that all of the supposed favors that Netanyahu did for his friend Arnon Milchan, he didn't do. So the charges completely fell apart. And this was supposed to be the sure case, that there was absolutely no way that this was going to break apart. It broke apart. Case 2000 was a case that claimed, and he is not indicted there for getting illegal gifts. He's indicted of a nebulous claim of breach of trust. So this is something that's just a manufactured claim that is completely up to the judge to determine whether there was a breach. But there was obviously no breach of trust here, because he didn't get what they claim he got, and he didn't do what they claimed he did. So that case fell apart in the prosecution's case. Case 2000, also a breach of trust case. And what was the case about here? They claimed that he was offered a bribe by the publisher of Israel's now second largest daily newspaper, Yediot Ahronot, which has been hounding Netanyahu basically since he entered politics in the 1980s. They hate him. And for many, many years, Yediot Ahronot was a monopoly in the newspaper market. And if you add to that the broadcast interests that the Yediot Ahronot group has in both Israeli television and in Israeli radio, it was a media monopoly in general. And then in 2007, a competing newspaper, Yisrael Hayom, began being published by the late magnate Sheldon Adelson, and it was supposed to offer a contrary right-wing view to Yediot Ahronot, which is a radical leftist newspaper. So you had one radical leftist newspaper that had a monopoly share in the entire media market. In 2007, Sheldon Adelson started publishing this free newspaper called Israel Hayom. And it was undermining Yediot Ahronot's not only power and influence, but also their profit margin, because it was a free newspaper that was able to keep going because of advertising revenue. And people were taking that for free rather than buying Yediot Ahronot. So the claim was that in a series of meetings in 2014 between Netanyahu and Arnon Moses, Arnon Moses asked Netanyahu to get his friend Sheldon Adelson to scale back the amount of papers, the distribution of Yediot Ahronot, and in exchange he would relent in a law that he was trying to get passed in the Knesset that was going to force Israel Hayom to close by forcing it to charge money for the newspaper. And so under examination, it worked out that no, in fact, that Netanyahu never made any promise to Arnon Milchik. To the contrary, he brought down his own government in order to block the bill, the Israel Hayom bill, from passing through the Knesset after a preliminary reading. He brought his own government down and went to new elections in 2015 to protect Israel Hayom from this law that was drafted by Noni Moses and put forward by one of Noni Moses's favorite politicians, then Justice Minister Tzipi Livni. Okay, so it was like there was a corrupt relationship between Noni Moses and Yediot Ahronot and a bunch of politicians, 43, who voted on behalf of this law. And he had an acrimonious relationship with Netanyahu that always got he always gave bad coverage, horrible, withering coverage, he still does to this day, against Netanyahu. And yet Netanyahu is indicted for breach of trust because he met with Noni Moses. There's no crime, there's no whiff of a crime, but it doesn't matter. They were using these as a means to try to say that he was in an influence peddling mode with Noni Moses, which didn't happen. So that case also fell apart during the prosecution's presentation of their witnesses. The third case is case 4000, and it's a case in which Netanyahu has been indicted for bribery, for accepting bribes, in which he received positive coverage from a website called Walla, and in exchange he gave regulatory favors to the corporation that owned Walla, Bezeq Telecommunication Corporation, that was owned by a friend of Netanyahu's named Shaul Alovich. Okay, and here the claim fell apart in two ways. First, all of the witnesses for the prosecution failed to make the claim that Netanyahu had given any regulatory favors to Bezeq, because he didn't. He wasn't involved in it. And in fact, the regulatory environment that Netanyahu had initiated with Bezeq was harmful to Bezeq. So not only did it not get any favors, actually Netanyahu's policies were harming Bezeq Telecommunication conglomerate. And on the other hand, of the bribe, essentially, that he was supposed to be getting positive coverage from this website that was owned by Shaul Alovich and by Walla, works out that he got horrible coverage, almost uniformly terrible coverage on the website, so that he got terrible coverage and he gave no regulatory favors. But he's still under indictment for bribery. He's still being charged with bribery. And at the end of the prosecution's case on bribery, the judges gently asked them to reconsider the charge and maybe drop it. And they refused, because the whole point is not, that he did something bad. It's that he's on trial and therefore they can oust him. They're using it as lawfare. It's not legal. And so, they won't let go of the charge because it's the only thing that's serious among the three charges that he's been charged with. Because what is breach of trust? It's nothing. And those cases also fell apart. So they go into the defense presentation with nothing. The case actually fell apart already well before August. And now they're supposed to begin with a defense presenting the defense of the prime minister, which was actually already concluded with the prosecution's case, because none of the witnesses were able to bear out any of the prosecution's claims against the prime minister. And they had over, I think, 80. All right. And none of them were able to do the work. And of course, they're the ones who are supposed to be proving beyond a reasonable doubt. They weren't able to prove beyond an unreasonable doubt. Like there was nothing there. So anyway, now they refuse to drop any of the charges. So the defense has to present its case, and they expect that it's going to go on for another 4 years. So this can go on until 2028, 2029. And it has to start now in the middle of the war, because the whole point isn't to get him convicted, it's to get him ousted. This is a political ploy, not a criminal ploy. They're using the allegations of criminal activities in order to oust the prime minister from office. And that's why they're going on. And now the play is to oust him from office because they're trying to force him to give testimony while he's supposed to be leading the country in war. And so that's going on. And now I want to just, go on, because that would be bad enough. Just, what I've told you to now in 27 minutes, that would be bad enough. But there are other things that they're doing in order to oust him. So the deep state in Israel is basically made up of a triumvirate, probably more, but the key figures are the legal fraternity, the media, and the general staff of the IDF, and the heads of the security establishment in the Shin Bet and in the Mossad. And so we talked, I think, last week about the lawfare that they're doing, that they're persecuting a former spokesman in the prime minister's office named Eli Feldstein, and 3 or 4 officers in the intelligence corps. And they're claiming that there's a huge security breach, that they leaked, and it's like terrible for Israel. This information about how Yahya Sinwar, the now dead mastermind of October 7th, was viewing hostage negotiations. And who did they leak it to? They leaked it to the prime minister. The 3 or 4 officers involved in the intelligence corps of the army, they had information that they saw that the head of military intelligence, Aaron Khaliwa, and then afterwards Yossi Binder, were blocking the prime minister from knowing, along with Herzia Levy, the chief of staff of the army, and the Shabak, about the negotiating position of Yahya Sinwar. And so they went around their hires and they contacted their friend, who is also an officer in the IDF, Eli Feldstein, who's working in the prime minister's office, and they gave him the information. They gave him the information, and Eli Feldstein published it in the German magazine Bild. Okay, and so everything is around this move by these intelligence officers, these low-ranking intelligence officers, to give what they consider to be vital, strategically significant information to the Prime Minister of Israel that was being hidden from him by the chief of staff of the army and the head of military intelligence and the head of the Shabak, the Shin Bet, Ronen Bar. Okay? So that's what's happening. And they were arrested 3 weeks ago by the Shabak, by the Shin Bet, and they have been tortured for 3 weeks. They were tortured for 3 weeks. I think some of them are getting out now, and denied the right to see an attorney for over a week and a half. Okay, so their human rights, their civil rights are just being completely abrogated, completely trounced. And how are they held? They were being held. I think some of them are still there. I think Feldstein is still there. They were being held in cells that are allocated for terrorists. Okay, they're these little cells. They're all in solitary confinement. They're not allowed to leave their cells all day long, except for, like 10-minute interrogations there, here and there. They have no outside time. And when they're moved from their cell to the interrogation cell, their heads are hooded like terrorists so that they can't see any of their surroundings. So they're blindfolded as they're walking to their interrogation cell and then delivered back into their room. They weren't allowed to see their lawyers for over a week and a half. So when Ephraim Dimri, who is Eli Feldstein's attorney, was on and also one of the attorney for one of the officers, was on the radio this morning, and he was explaining the condition that he found Eli Feldstein in the first time that he met him. And he said that Eli Feldstein looked at him and he said, "I'd rather be dead. Yeah, death is preferable to what I'm going through here." Okay, and this is a guy worked in the Prime Minister's office, an army officer. All he did was put out this information. Now, what was this information? Oh, well, if you want to understand, let's look for a second at this hostage video. I don't feel like playing it for you, but just look at the hostage video that the Islamic Jihad released yesterday of hostage Sasha Trufanov. And we're not going to play it, but I'm going to tell you what he said. Okay, so this is Sasha Trufanov, who has been a hostage since October 7th. Sasha was kidnapped from his mother's home in Nir Oz kibbutz, along with his girlfriend, his mother, and his grandmother. His father was murdered. So the four of them were kidnapped to Gaza. Sasha, who works for Amazon, and Jeff Bezos, to his shame, never said a word, has not said a word. Amazon has not said a word about their employee, who is an engineer, Sasha Trufanov, who is being held hostage in Gaza. And so this is actually the third video that was released. Sasha is also a Russian national. His grandmother was released as a gesture for Vladimir Putin, and his mother and girlfriend were released in the the ceasefire for hostages in November. So Sasha was left behind, and there was this video of him. And what did he say in this video that, aside from his picture, I don't want to show you? So Sasha said there, well, you have to, he said, thank you all for opposing Prime Minister Netanyahu. You have to go out into the streets and demonstrate. We want you to demonstrate. You need to demonstrate for me because I'm suffering because of the prime minister who's forcing this war on us that's not going to get me free. And you have to go and you have to demonstrate. And I want you to, I want you to step up your anti-government and demonstrations, block traffic, paralyze the economy for at least several days. That's the way to do it. That's the way to get me out. It's the way to oust Netanyahu from power. So what he's saying is precisely what Sinwar said in these documents that he approved going back, I think, to January. Okay, this was first published actually in January. So Sinwar, they captured these documents in one of these tunnels that the IDF took over in January, and they found a computer that Sinwar had been using. And these were his instructions to the negotiating team, that you have to blame Netanyahu for the plight of the hostages. You have to say he's the one blocking the deal, and that the fight is killing the hostages, and the hostages are being protected by the terrorists who are holding them. And every single hostage video, lo and behold, this has been what the hostages have been saying, because obviously the script is written for them by their captors, and this is what Trufanov said in the video that was released yesterday. Okay, and all of this was in the computer data that the army was hiding from Prime Minister Netanyahu, that Eli Feldstein got out with the help of these intelligence officers who gave the information to him that the chief of staff of the army and the head of intelligence and the head of the Shin Bet were blocking from the prime minister receiving. And so now they were tortured by the Shabak for 3 weeks for this. The officers, and it's not to get an admission. The officer who gave Feldstein the information admitted that he was the source of the information to Feldstein the first day, like an hour after he was arrested. But that wasn't the point, because the point is that the Shabak is using their arrest to try to force Feldstein to turn state witness against Netanyahu. And that goes back to cases 1,000, 2,000, and 4,000, because what happened when they were building this case is that the police investigators, acting at the orders of the prosecutors, literally tortured Netanyahu's top advisors and his friends, including Shaul Alovich, of a 70-plus-year-old man with a heart condition, his wife, Iris, and his mother, and his son, and threatened to bankrupt him unless he turned state witness against Netanyahu. He didn't, because he said, I have nothing to give. They went after Shlomo Filber, who was the Director General of the Ministry of Communications. They held him under arrest for weeks, like they did the Aloviches, until he broke. And they threatened his son. They threatened his businesses. They destroyed his reputation. They did it to Nir Chefetz, who was Netanyahu's spokesman. They destroyed his marriage. They did it to Ari Harrow, who was Netanyahu's the head of his office. In case 2000, they destroyed his family. They got him divorced from his wife. They broke up his family. They tried to bankrupt him. They destroyed his reputation. They destroyed his health. All of these things. To try to get all of them, to force all of these to people who are upstanding citizens, who are public servants, to to go against the prime ministers, to become public witnesses. And as I said, over the past 4 years of testimony of the prosecution's case, all of these prosecution witnesses, including these 4 men or 3 men, because Shaul Alovich is also a defendant here, so Chefetz, Harrow, Filber, they all were star witnesses in the end on behalf of the prime minister because it worked out that they had nothing on him. It was all a lie. So here, too, they're trying to get Feldstein broken. They're trying to break him so that he'll say something about Netanyahu so that they can get Netanyahu. And this isn't the only thing that they're doing. Today, his chief of staff, Tzachi Braverman, is speaking to Israel's version of the FBI. He's being questioned about claims that he doctored protocols after October 7th to try to make the prime minister look good. The case was already investigated, and it fell apart months ago because they have nothing. They just regurgitated it because they wanted to make it look like they've got a lot of stuff on the prime minister. So he's having to undergo an investigation today with these interrogators when he did nothing wrong. And it's already been proven that he did nothing wrong, but they don't care. They just want to keep it going. They want to keep the story in the news to make it look like Prime Minister Netanyahu is terrible. This week, we also had banner headlines in Yediot Ahronot and in every other newspaper and on every channel except for Channel 14 claiming that now there's information that Netanyahu had advanced information about Hamas's invasion that he found out the night of October 7th, between October 6th and October 7th, because what the most devastating aspect of what happened on October 7th for these political generals is that since October 7th, the public has known. It came out very early on. You always get the big flood of information early on before they have a chance to shut it off, right? So it came out that they knew that Hamas had turned on the SIM cards that they had for Israeli SIM cards, that all of the leaders of Hamas had gone into the tunnels. They had all of the information on the drills, on the exercises that Hamas was doing leading up to an invasion of Israel. And they knew they had these indications that the invasion was imminent on the night between October 6th and October 7th. And they didn't inform any of the ground commanders. They didn't inform the police that on the ground to close down the Nova Festival. They didn't inform any of the kibbutzim that the people would leave. They didn't inform the division commander of the Gaza division. Everybody was on vacation. They didn't tell them to wake up for dawn watch so that they would be on guard instead of in their beds where they were slaughtered. They didn't send the observers home. They let them there to be taken hostage and to be raped and slaughtered. They didn't do any of these things. And the other person that they didn't tell was the prime minister. They didn't inform the prime minister. It was just the chief of staff of the IDF, Herzi Halevi, the assistant to the head of military intelligence, because they couldn't wake him up, Aaron Khalifa. It was the head of the Shin Bet, Ronen Bar. They knew. And I think the general of the Southern Command, although I'm not sure, knew. And they didn't tell the head of the Air Force. He didn't know. And the first that Netanyahu found out about it was when the missiles started falling in Israel and the invasion began at 6:30 in the morning, 6:29 in the morning on October 7th. It was the first he heard of it. So they started making up this story that Netanyahu found out earlier, and that there was an attempt to tell his military attaché, but they weren't able to reach him. And it all fell apart immediately, but they keep prolonging the story. They keep prolonging the story to try to get it out. There was a banner headline in Yediot, even though by the time that the newspaper went to press, they already knew that it was a lie. They're just publishing more and more of this stuff to try to make it look like Netanyahu shares culpability in October 7th when he doesn't. So they're doing all of these things, and there are more. I mean, they're all stupid, like all of these claims against Prime Minister Netanyahu, and they've all come out one on top of the other, on top of the other, on top of the other. They've all fallen apart. The police told the court and told the Shabak and told the state prosecutors, look, you got no case against Feldstein. Like the actual information that we're getting from the investigation is there's like no connection between it and what's coming out in the media. Right? And the Shin Bet got really mad at them. And the people that got most angry were the state prosecutors who are behind this whole thing. So, you have these reserve officers in intelligence who have, spent over 200 days in reserves fighting this war, right? And they're under arrest now. They're being treated like terrorists with hoods over their heads, in solitary confinement, in terrorist cells. for nothing. And why? Because they're trying to get the prime minister. And why is it so important to oust him? Because Donald Trump. Because on January 20th, Donald Trump is coming into office. And he's coming into office with a mandate and a goal of destroying the American deep state that went after him, that did the exact same things that our deep state is doing to Israel and is doing to the prime minister. They did them to him, and he's breaking them apart. I mean, you see all of the appointments: Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy. They're supposed to go after the bureaucracy. You have Matt Gaetz, who's like the executioner, who's supposed to take over the Department of Justice as Attorney General. You have Pete Hegseth, who's supposed to fire all of the DEI generals who have been demoralizing the forces and changing the mission of the American military and destroying recruitment, because who wants to go into that kind of a woke military? I mean, he's got everybody in, to like go after everybody, right? John Ratcliffe at the CIA. I mean, that's their goal. That's their job. They promised they were going to do it, and he's going to go and do it. So how is the deep state in Israel going to work with these people? How are they going to help? They're not going to have any collusion once Biden is gone, bringing down the prime minister. The United States has been a complete partner in everything that they've been doing against Netanyahu and against his supporters for the past 2 years. And so how is the Attorney General, Gali Baharav Miara, who's running this whole circus, and you can't fire her, because if you do, then the Supreme Court will say that Netanyahu is unfit to lead. Why? Reasons. Because they arrogated the power to oust the prime minister, and that's what they're planning on doing if he dares to fire this attorney general who is trying to oust him from power. So, we have, how are they going to do that when Netanyahu is working with Trump? They can't. So for them, the matter of utmost urgency is to block that. And they don't care about precipitating a defeat in this war. They don't care that lives will be lost in this country because of what they're doing. They don't care that the public wants Netanyahu to be prime minister. I mean, all of the polling data show he just keeps going up. Right now, under his leadership, not only is the Likud polling better than it won in the November 2022 elections, but his coalition itself is growing. So, and his government isn't falling. He just got, his coalition just expanded from 64 to 68 seats. So, you look at this and you say, this is so anti-democratic. And they say that they're operating in the name of democracy. But they don't care anymore. They don't care everybody sees them. They don't care that the public is aghast at what's happening. It's life or death for these people. And they're evil. They are evil. Look at what they're doing to Eli Feldstein and to these 3 officers or 4 officers, I can't remember. These are national heroes. And they're treating them literally like terrorists. It's an affront to everything that we stand for, everything that we've been fighting for. And yet this is what they're doing. It's not just that, it works out that these officers, these leaders, these fake leaders, these Herzl Levy types, these Ronen Bar types, they have been, so the thing with the Sinwar document, what is the other implication here? It's that there's never been a hostage deal on the table. He had absolutely no intention of ever reaching a deal with Israel on the hostages. None. There is never any deal, which is, by the way, what Jake Sullivan said. I think Tony Blinken even said it. It's not just, it's not just Caroline Glick saying, it's the Americans said it. It's not just Sinwar saying it. Sinwar said, we're using the hostages as a means to oust Netanyahu from power because he's the biggest problem for our survival. He's the biggest threat to our survival. We have to get rid of him. Okay? There's no deal. This guy isn't interested in making a deal. And that's exactly what Islamic Jihad just did through Sasha Trufanov with this latest hostage video. Right? They're saying, look, just oust Netanyahu from power and all will be well. And so they have been pushing. And just even last night, the head of the hostage authority or whatever it's called, his name is Nitzan Alon. He was brought in to lead it and to be Herzl Levy's, the IDF's representative in the hostage talks. And he is a radical leftist. He was the commander of the Central Command, which is in charge of Judea and Samaria, about 10 years ago. And I wrote so many articles attacking him because he's a radical leftist. He's a radical post-Zionist leftist. And so he's brought in as the military member, the senior member of the hostage negotiating team, in order to politicize the hostage deal. That's the whole point. That's why he's there. So he keeps briefing, leaking from cabinet meetings, leaking from negotiating sessions to pretend that there's a deal that Netanyahu is torpedoing. So he is actually doing what Sinwar wants him to do. He's working essentially as Hamas's agent here. And they're trying to precipitate an Israeli surrender in this war in exchange for hostages when there's no deal on the table. And why are they trying to do this? Because they don't want us to win. Netanyahu gave this speech, and I'll just show you a clip of it here.
בימים האחרונים, הלשכה שלי נתונה למתקפה פרועה וחסרת מעצורים. בעוד הממשלה והקבינט בראשותי פועלים ללא הרף להדוף את אויבינו שמבקשים את השמדתנו. פועלים ללא הרף להביא להכרעת אויבינו. בעוד אני מנהל את המלחמה ועודף מתקפות בינלאומיות מזירות שונות, כעת אנחנו מתמודדים ביתר שאת עם חזית נוספת. הפייק ניוז של התקשורת. זה לא סוד לכם. מתחילת המלחמה, מבול של הדלפות פליליות וחמורות מציף את מדינת ישראל. הדלפות פליליות וחמורות אלה מלוות לעתים בשקרים והשמצות חסרות בסיס, שיטפון של הדלפות, מהקבינט המדיני-ביטחוני, מקבינט המלחמה בזמנו, צונאמי מתמשך של הדלפות מצוות המשא ומתן, וההדלפות האלה נותנות מידע חיוני לאיראן, לחיזבאללה, לחמאס, מידע אשר מסכן את המדינה, מסכן את לוחמנו, מסכן גם את השבת חטופינו. תבינו, החמאס מקבל מידע מתוך חדר הדיונים של צוות המשא ומתן של ישראל. חיזבאללה ואיראן מקבלים לפעמים בשידור חי תמלולים של הדיונים בתוכנו על דרכי הפעולה נגדם והוויכוחים בינינו. לגבי כל אלה התנהלו אפס חקירות, אפס. וזה קרה חרף הבקשות החוזרות ונשנות שלי לפתוח בחקירות. אפילו לא בודקים. למה? כי המטרה היא לא להגן על ביטחון המדינה. המטרה היא לקדם אג'נדה של חולשה וויתורים תוך כדי המלחמה.
So what did he say here? He said that there are people who are trying to, who don't want to win the war. Who? The heads of the IDF and the Shabak. They don't want it to happen, because if it happens, what happens? Then they're out on their butts. And Netanyahu won the war, and everybody knows that. It's like, it's hard to get your brain around. But for them, the privilege of the deep state in Israel, the privileges of our ruling class are more important than the victory in the war. Their enemy, number one, is not Hamas. It's not Iran. It's not Hezbollah. It's Netanyahu and the public that he rode in on, right? We're the horse. We brought him to office. So we also be damned. Because their biggest enemy, and he is totally focused on Israel's biggest enemies, right? Iran and its terror armies. And that's why he's prosecuting the war to the bitter end, till we win. And their enemy number one is him. And so they're prosecuting their war to the bitter end. And that's the showdown that we've reached right now. We've gotten from their perspective to, the end point. They know that it's game over for them if Netanyahu is back in office with Trump. So they have to oust him now at all costs, and that's what's happening. So, I mean, I don't think that they're going to succeed. And part of the reason that I'm doing the show to expose it is to help, to prevent them from succeeding. But, I mean, it's a stunning thing. And, people who are looking at this from America, this is what would be awaiting you if Trump hadn't been elected. And, lucky for you, the American president has a lot more executive power because the Supreme Court and the legal fraternity there haven't stolen as much of the executive power from the president and the legislative power from the Congress as our judicial system has stolen, has arrogated from the executive and the legislature. So I'm actually, despite the fact that I'm aghast and I'm deeply, deeply concerned and I can't believe that this is happening, it's just too shocking for me. I'm sort of optimistic because I feel like this is their swan song. This is what they got. They're throwing it all in, and we have these legal people who are pretty much on the left who are saying, look, if the Supreme Court orders that Netanyahu be ousted from power, then then the government simply cannot abide by the Supreme Court's determination because it destroys Israeli democracy completely, and we can't have that. So you have leftist jurists who are even acknowledging, well, one, but whatever, that's enough. And we can make him a plural. Probably he'll have a friend. It's insane, and the people won't take it. And that's the last thing that I'm going to say here. We've been through so much this year, and we're not going to take it. It's like one thing you could make these claims when it was all theoretical that reforming the judiciary was somehow or another going to harm democracy. People don't know what you're talking about, and you're saying it 24/7 on just about every single news outlet in the country. You're rallying for it. All the beautiful people are out in the streets with all the best rock stars, just like Israel's version of Taylor Swift and all the rest of them on the stage in Tel Aviv at these protests, calling for protection of democracy. You can kind of understand why people might be swept up in the moment, not to mention the fact that they have massive support from the Biden administration behind all of their efforts to oust the sitting prime minister from power. But, then October 7th came. And that was a pivot point in Israeli history. That was a pivot point in Jewish history. And, and you can't unsee what you saw. They knew about it at least several hours ahead of time. They could have prevented it. But not only did they not tell the people on the ground that should have prevented, that were in a position to prevent it, to protect the people, to block Hamas from invasion, they didn't tell the prime minister who was in a position to order them to do that. We saw. It's over. So now, it's all them running around. It's not going to happen. Netanyahu, maybe he will figure out a way to testify and be prime minister and war at the same time. Maybe. But if he doesn't, bring it on. Bring it on. We're not scared of these people anymore. Anyway, those are my thoughts. And next week, I was hoping to do it today, but we couldn't schedule it. I'm going to have Arab affairs expert Sfi Khizkeli, or Islamic affairs expert, also on the show, and he's going to be a fabulous guest. And obviously, there'll be more in focuses before I fly off again to the United States. Anyway, I'll see you guys soon. Take care and have a good weekend.